What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Word. So I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And for the video version of this, I'm so sorry. My mic broke, so the audio is going to be trash. And you're going to hear everything that's going on. But anyway, besides that, I have... Oh wait, before I start these, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research to come to your own conclusions, to have your own answers, to make your own decisions, and I believe in your ability to do so, to be your own person. And before I start, I have an audio version of this podcast anywhere you can find podcasts, and I have a video version of the podcast on YouTube. They're both named The Spiritual Word. I'm your host, Jackie. I upload Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And if science, psychology, spirituality, self-help, and philosophy are things that you're interested in, those are my main 5 topics. So I recommend subbing or following whatever platform you're finding me on so you don't miss another update. So, because I want this week to be like a break from the book that we're reading, I'm gonna do... I was kind of contemplating that, to be honest, but I'm gonna do a break from this book because... One, I'm just gonna wait to get my mic before I do the book reading again, just because I feel like the audio should be decent, you know? And because this, what's it called? Because my phone doesn't have an aux, because it's a newer version of phones, I can't just plug in my headphones and call it a day, which I would normally do, so that's unfortunate. And I don't have an adapter, so we're stuck with the literal audio from my phone. So I don't want to read this until I can get my mic back, and that's gonna be a minute, you know. So what I was thinking about doing this week is starting my crash course on spirituality, quotation mark, spirituality for dummies. Because I feel like there's a lot of concepts that a lot of people think are a little bit too complex to get into. And spirituality being one of the biggest ones. Or, I don't even really like to say spirituality, but spirituality as a unit seems very complex. Or seems to be a very complex idea. Or a very complex structure. I don't know how to explain it. It's like... people think that spirituality is its own intellectual idea that has nothing to do with what they're doing now, which is not true. And so people have a lot of misconceived or preconceived ideas. And for that reason, I'm going to do my crash course. So today's going to be the first episode. And basically what I want to talk about is kind of what this book talks about, just because I feel like this book really encapsulates the idea of everything that I talk about so perfectly without me even having to talk about it. But I also think that there's a lot of things that are kind of hard to understand when it comes to books and stuff like that. So just like this book that we're reading, Start Where You Are, that's going to be my first... I don't want to say tip, but that's my first idea that I want to put out there. And have this basis, or have this notion, or this idea that spirituality is not like a separate part of your life. Just like how psychology is not a separate part of your life, but because you don't use the ideas of psychology, it seems foreign. But psychology is constantly happening in your physical reality through everyday interactions. When you talk to people, when you sit down and have a conversation by yourself in your own head, or if you imagine things, or the ways that you move, or the ways that you express yourself. Everything has its own intertwining of things. So nothing is really that far of a reach. And I think that's the first huge idea that I want to give you guys. Because a lot of people, they think that spirituality is this really huge concept. And it's not. And I think most people think that it's a foreign idea for the sake that they don't practice, per se. They don't practice it on a day-to-day basis, but you don't have to practice talking. You know what I mean? Also, sorry, I'm moving around a lot, but it's that idea that, like, a lot of people think that a lot of concepts are out of reach for them. And for that reason, I want to start by saying that because I understand that everything is intertwined, this makes everything a little bit easier for me, particularly me, to learn different things or pick up things a lot quicker than other people. The basic idea is that you don't know anything. And that's starting from nothing, that's starting from scratch, that everyone thinks is so scary and so hard to, produce an outcome from nothing, is the perfect place to start. And when I looked down on my timestamp, it was 5:55. So understand that spirituality isn't some huge like concept that you have to physically learn and you have to really study and blah blah blah, those things are good, obviously, but it's not something that you have to do to be spiritual. And spirituality is your living experience. You are constantly involved with your spirituality, whether or not you realize that or not. Let me make this easier. You're constantly intertwined with your spirituality through every single waking moment, because every single waking moment you're making choices. And your spirituality is your ability to have free will. And everybody has free will. Every single moment of the day, you have free will. I can choose to not upload because my mics are not working, or I can choose to tough it out. And, sorry to the people who are going to be suffering, but, it's a choice. And everybody has a choice. I can choose to wear this shirt with my little stain that I put with oil. I put oil on my face, like a vitamin E oil, and it fell on my shirt. And I had the conscious choice to replace my shirt, change it out for a new one, or not. And I chose not to. So that's your spirituality. Your spirituality is free will. To put it very basic, because everybody has free will. Therefore, it's in everybody. And it's inherent. It is your nature. And the reason that I want to start off with getting to the point where you understand that you have free will, so therefore you're spiritual, is for later in this series for us to have even harder concepts to grasp. And the fact that you have the ability to think. Thinking is also part of the spiritual realm. And it's very interesting to have conversations with people who don't identify as spiritual people. Because, one, you have thoughts. Even if those thoughts are different psychologically, manifested here in physical reality. Like, I know people who don't have a monologue, or like they don't think with words, and they don't think with physical thoughts. Like, my thoughts, I can hear my thoughts. People, they can't always hear their thoughts. Some people see their thoughts. Some people just see words. Some people, they just see pictures. So it's different how it manifests, but everybody has thoughts. It's just their way of thoughts. And that gets down into their individuality and who they're supposed to be. And because, the physical realm is manifested through the non-physical, I think that spirituality has this misconception that it's hard to grasp these concepts because everything seems so real, if that makes sense. And everything seems so real. So real, but also so real. There's this contrast which a lot of people get into the yin and yang of things, right? But I feel like the yin and yang of things is a very simple thing. And it's only hyped up to be this deeper thing. The deeper you get into rabbit holes of spirituality, but spirituality is a very basic thing. Like, it's a very easy to understand thing. It's a very basic thing. And the only reason I feel that people have a hard time understanding spirituality as a whole unit is because there's so many rabbit holes you can choose from. But there's an overarching theme to this concept, and that is the fact that everything is spiritual. And I also want to make it known that spirituality doesn't have anything to do with religion, because I had that misconception that religions are spiritual and spirituality is religion, and not necessarily a religion per se, but it has religious qualities to it. And I don't like the idea that religions have rules. And that's something else that I had to understand. And also understand when it comes to Buddhism, because Buddhism doesn't have any rules. Is, I think, well, technically no what's it called? Religions have rules, right? Based off free will, because I consciously can choose to do whatever I want behind closed doors. But the fluidity that you get from spirituality, or the fluidity that you get from Buddhism, are what made me realize that spirituality is not a religion, and it's not like I was perceiving religions as a whole. I was perceiving them to be this reward and punishment type of thing, instead of seeing them for what they are, which is a connection to the external, which is actually connecting to the internal, or connecting to the internal to connect to the external, and vice versa. And so the more we get into these topics, the more you're going to be able to see that everything is really easy and really mundane. And not mundane in a bad way, because I think that a lot of people have a misconception that mundane is boring. But I think that there's beauty in the mundane. So the first couple of things that I also want to add is that because you are spiritual by nature, you are a spiritual being. And I really want to ingrain that in you, because most people, when they're getting into spirituality, they have a lot of doubts, and a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of beliefs that they need to uproot in order to actually believe this to be true. And I want to use some of the things that reality trains you in to think that these things are real. And that, for one, is your physical experience. This physical experience is so real to you that when you want to believe in something else, it's very hard to. But the reason for that is because the spiritual creates the physical. So in order for you to have beliefs, the spiritual will back it up. So if you do not believe that you are a spiritual being, then reality will make you perceive that to be true at every single moment of the day, every single time that you think that. And because your thoughts are a part of the etheric realm, your thoughts are your free will. And when you exercise your free will, the 3D physical experience, me, you, this chair that I'm sitting in, the light that's physically coming off of my light, the camera, all of this experience will back that up for you, because it is made for you. And that's a very hard thing to grasp, but that itself is a basic, it's not a basic concept in the fact that, like, you're not going to understand it right away, but it's a basic concept in understanding what spirituality is. Spirituality is the fabric of your existence. And because it is the fabric of your existence, it will match whatever you perceive it to be. And so it's like, if, for example, I'm somebody who's like extremely not trusting, and I exercise my free will, and my free will says that my feelings of not being able to trust people, that shit is real. So to me, if I meet somebody and they're like, hey, what's this, what's that, what's this, blah, 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 asking me questions and, you know, doing their thing, just being a human, my reality is going to back up what I'm feeling. Because I have free will. And because I'm actually creating this existence through my physical thoughts and emotions and experience. So I sit there and I'm like, I don't know why, but I don't like that person. Then your reality will give you a reason to not like that person. And it's that simple. So when you meet somebody and you're like, oh, I love this person is my person, or this person is my best friend, or whatever the fuck, you know, whatever the case is, I really enjoy this thing. That's you creating that scenario. So I don't want to get too deep into this because I feel like I'm already really deep into this, but the basic concepts that I want you to take away from this episode, if you take away anything, is that you have free will. That's what makes you spiritual. And your free will creates its own existence through this cycle. And you know that there's this picture of a snake eating its own tail. What goes around comes around. That type of thing, that karmic circle. That is because whatever you are feeding yourself, you will take back in, right? If you're eating something, it's going into your body. And that same thing is true for your free will. So I think I don't want to get too far into this, just because sometimes I can get a little deep without knowing I'm getting deep. But it's a very basic, deep thing. Like, it's a very basic thing. You don't necessarily know why certain things are the way that they are, but don't be caught up on why or how. And the reason is because you can go down rabbit holes trying to explain these tiny concepts instead of allowing yourself to not know these concepts. And the more you do not know, the more you're able to take things in like a sponge. So that's another reason why I say, you know, don't be concerned with the fact that you don't know anything, because that's why you're here. You're here to intake information. And the more you take, like, let's say you decide to replay this episode 4 times a day, and by the, you know, 5th or 6th day of watching this, you understand it, but you don't know why you understand it. You get these concepts, you don't know why you get these concepts, but you get the concepts. That's the programming, but we'll get into that in another episode. Basically, another thing that I want you to take away is that you don't know anything. Spirituality is kind of fun for the fact that, like, you don't really know anything. And it's kind of like consciousness. We don't really know anything about consciousness, but yet I'm sitting here conscious. And when you go into a class, you go in there not knowing anything. And that is the perfect place to start, because you will absorb things like a sponge, because you don't know anything. So don't try to know everything. And don't go down rabbit holes on rabbit holes, especially if you know that that's not going to help you. Because if you're anything like me, you're going to take those concepts and think and think and think and think and think. So if you're going to do anything, I recommend meditating and just being open to whatever your mind, your spirit comes up with. Because I guarantee that it's not just you thinking that. And my last takeaway is to meditate on these concepts. And I know that a lot of people don't like to meditate because it seems like a chore. Like for me, for a long time, it seemed like a chore. But when you get into it and you just allow yourself to meditate, it's actually very relaxing and it helps regulate your mental health. So it has benefits spiritually as well as physically. And there's nothing better than that. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. I'm going to end this here. And for the people who were on the video version, I'm so sorry for the audio. Like, I'm so sorry. I know that you can hear everything that's going on around me, and I am so freaking sorry. But I didn't want to not upload because of a tiny thing like my mic, and I'll be getting a mic soon. So don't stress because I got you guys. And I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in and tapping in. As always, my babies, I love you and I appreciate you for being here. And welcome to my crash course. And I always say that these are for entertainment purposes only, for the reason that I don't know shit. So don't take my word for it. And yeah, thanks for tuning in and tapping in, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.